Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast. My name is Mike Keenitz, and today I'm interviewing Jordan, who has a master's degree in nutrition, and she's also a personal trainer. And today we are going to be talking about sugar, artificial sweeteners, as well as sugar alcohols a little bit. We'll talk about the effects on the body and how to know what you're actually digesting, because those food labels can be quite confusing. So without further ado, here's Jordan. Well, welcome back to the program, Jordan. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Today we're going to talk about sugar and artificial sweeteners. So we have lots of questions to get through. So I'm just going to dive into it right away. So
good.
Can you briefly explain the role of sugar in our diet and its impact on health?
Sure. So I'll kind of this will just give everybody kind of a general overview of what we're talking about here. I think generally most people know what sugar is, but just to kind of provide a little clarification, it is a form of carbohydrates. And like all carbohydrates and different forms of them, they provide a source of energy in our diet. Okay. However, the difference between sugar and other sources of carbohydrates, sugar doesn't contain other nutrients like vitamins and minerals. It's just pure carbohydrates. Okay. There are tons of different types of sugars. And the majority of sugar in the American diet is coming from added sugar, which is sucrose. Okay. Our body takes sucrose, like in table sugar or any processed foods you eat with added sugar, and breaks them down into glucose as a form of energy our body can use. The problem is our diets are filled with way too much of it. So I don't think that's probably a mystery. I think at least most people know that that is the case. So really, we're going to focus our conversation on like all of those added sugars. But I also want people to be aware there are natural forms of sugar too in fruit, so fructose. And then there's also natural forms of sugar in dairy products. Now, I'm not going to put those in the same category as added sugars in our conversation today. Okay. In terms of the role it plays in our health, well, first of all, it's on average. I'm not talking about every single person, not you, Mike, but most Americans are consuming up to 17 teaspoons of sugar every day. Some people more, some people less, but that's kind of the nationwide average. And that's about 2 to 3 times the amount that's recommended. And I would honestly probably argue, being a nutritionist, that the amount that's recommended is even still too high. But and the numbers that we're seeing as far as sugar consumption are continuing to increase year over year. And it causes a host of issues. Obesity it's linked to, diabetes, inflammation, tooth decay, and a host of other issues that we'll probably expand more upon later, but that's just kind of general overview.
Yeah, it's a highly available, cheap substance to put in foods, so it's pretty cost effective, so that's why it's used so often.
And it tastes great. It's nice and addictive too, so food manufacturers are smart.
Yeah, it's very palatable.
Yeah.
So next question we touched on a little bit. What are the key differences between natural sugars found in fruits and honey and added sugars like in processed foods?
Well, one thing I want to clarify is sugar. Okay. A lot of times people will think, well, if it's natural, then it's completely fine. Like honey's natural, right? It comes from bees. I can eat as much of that as I want. I want people to understand that it's still sugar in the body and it is a source of added sugar in our diet. So to be mindful of that, but there are some key differences. So one huge difference I want to talk about first is like sugar found in fruit compared to like your table sugar or added sugar. So the big main difference is the sugar that you find in fruit, that's accompanied by vitamins, minerals, fiber. So the way our body utilizes that and digests it and processes it and metabolizes it is completely different than table sugar. We're not going to get this massive insulin spike like if we eat give me a processed crappy food like a Oreo
gummy
cookie.
Bears.
Thank you. Gummy bears. I like that better because that's just pure sugar. I was trying to think of something pure sugar wise. So as compared to eating an apple, because an apple is going to be accompanied by fiber, lots of different vitamins and minerals. So our body's going to take longer for that to digest. It's not just going to cause this immediate blood sugar spike. So the way our body utilizes it is completely different. So you cannot compare sugar in fruit to sugar in gummy bears or other added sugar products. However, I do want to differentiate that fruit juice, even though if it's 100% fruit, I don't care, that is going to act the same way as eating some gummy bears. Okay. Arguably worse because you can drink way more of it than you can actually consume. So, anyways, and then regular table sugar doesn't have any health benefits to go along with it like fruit does. Okay. So that kind of addresses the fruit question. As far as honey goes, as I mentioned, that's still sugar, but it's at least a less processed form and a very recognizable form for our body to utilize. And there are some compounds in it that are beneficial, but I want people to know it's still a contributor of added sugar in the diet and therefore should be limited. But overall, I personally feel it's a better choice than just pure, table sugar. Because it doesn't go through the processing and everything like regular sugar does. So I think that kind of answered it as far as fruits and honey. I think those are the main two you had asked about.
Yeah, so how much of fruit sugar and honey is actually sucralose? Isn't there a combination of what type of sugars they are?
Sucralose. So sucralose is an artificial sweetener. Are you talking about sucrose?
Sucrose, sorry, they sound so similar. I get
No,
mixed up in
I
my
know.
head.
There's so many different names of sugar. It gets super confusing. I don't have the exact percentages in front of me, but there is a different composition between the two of those. I can't.
Isn't it fructose and sucrose is what in
Correct.
fruit? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes. Yep. And fructose in its pure form, real bad. Like by itself, like in corn syrup.
Sure.
That's like the evil of all evils in terms of the sugar world.
That's even a
Pure fructose.
bigger effect on blood sugar than normal sugar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and a pretty strong link and correlation to like developing fatty liver disease with too much of that.
So, are there any health benefits to consuming natural sugars in moderation?
That's a loaded question because
I like loaded questions.
the short answer I probably could say like yes, but it truly depends on the person and your health goals. Like, am I talking to a diabetic here or am I talking to a marathon runner? Like, very different conversations to be had. But for most people, like, the natural sugars found in fruit are totally fine as long as we're not eating, 10 bananas a day. If we're having a modest amount of fruit and it's part of a balanced whole food diet and, we're combining it with protein and healthy fats, I think there's a ton of health benefits and there's tons of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and all sorts of great things that come alongside of consuming fruit. Sometimes fruit can get a bad rap in the world of nutrition. When we started talking about carbohydrates as being like such an enemy and everything, like that's not the case for everybody. And depending upon the person's goals, it can be a really great thing. So yes, ton of health benefits there. The other thing too is natural sugars found in dairy products can also provide health benefits, assuming that person doesn't have an intolerance or allergy to dairy products, because that is definitely a common problem in today's world. But let's just say somebody can tolerate dairy products very well. There's some great benefit when you're looking at, plain unsweetened varieties of dairy products. For example, plain organic, full fat, unsweetened yogurt can be a really good, healthy source and provide us with a lot of nutrients without all of the added sugar. So the big key with dairy is making sure that you're purchasing plain, like in its whole form, not anything added. There is going to be some natural sugar in there from the lactose, but it's not the added sugars. So just being able to differentiate the two when you're shopping is huge.
Yeah, if you've never had it, it kind of tastes like sour cream. Just
Yeah.
if you put some fruit in there, or maybe honey or protein
Yes.
powder or something, it definitely, yeah. I use it more of a base. I don't like to eat it plain. It just tastes like sour cream.
No, unless you're wanting sour cream, like great if
Yeah.
you're wanting to put it on your, tacos or something like that. But it's not, yeah, it's not super tasty on its own, but you're still 10 times better off buying that kind and then putting your own stuff in it because you can control then how much sugar you're putting in. And when you're buying it, like a strawberry yogurt, go flip that over and check out the added sugar sometime. You'd be floored. You might as well just drink a pop. There's so much sugar, so you're way better off just adding your own.
Yeah, majority of sweetened yogurts or even kefirs, which is like a yogurt like drink, is typically has tons of added sugar. And there's a few like newer with artificial sweeteners, which we'll get into later in this podcast. But
Yes. Oh, and then also we could touch on this. I don't know your opinion on full fat versus fat-free dairy products, but I'll give my insight on it anyways. I think you're way better off buying full fat dairy products versus the fat-free counterpart, because what happens in food manufacturing, dairy naturally has fat in it, right? If you take it out, it tastes like garbage. So they have to put something to make it taste good, and it's going to be sugar. So you're going to have more sugar in like your fat-free yogurt compared to your just plain full fat variety as it's found in nature. So I personally would rather have more healthy fats in my diet than sugar. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think a lot of milk is like that too. There's less calories, but the carbohydrate count goes up and the fat count goes down.
Yep.
And the fats actually slow down the digestion of the sugars. So,
Correct.
okay, so how can people identify hidden sugars in processed food, considering they may not always be labeled as sugar?
Well, get educated because there are over 50, I think like 56 different
50.
names for sugar. There might be more, but we'll just call it over 50. I am not going to sit and rattle off all the different names, but I think the biggest thing is to be able to interpret your food labels. So first of all, before you purchase anything, I'm always a big fan, flip it over, check out the ingredients. Like, do you recognize things in there? If there's some weird thing that you can't pronounce or you don't know what it is, it could be sugar, because there's a lot of crazy names for it, but then also looking at the nutrition facts for added sugars. But so again, I'm not going to rattle off all these names to you, but I'm going to give you a few maybe that are a little bit more common or just things you can watch for. But you can find a list online, easy to Google. But high fructose corn syrup, that's sugar, probably arguably one of our worst, most highly processed forms of sugar. Also just regular corn syrup. Beet sugar, which for some people can sound nice, like, oh, it comes from vegetables. No, it's just sugar. Dextrin, maltodextrin, those are really common and those are sugar. Agave syrup, blackstrap molasses, malt syrup, brown rice syrup is another common one you'll see. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I think I just rattled off maybe 6 names. There's well over 50 that you need to watch out for. So the main point with this is you just need to understand it's not always just cut and dry. You flip over your label and it just says sugar. Sometimes there's some hidden names for it. So just to be aware of that. And eating foods with ingredients you can pronounce is just a good rule of thumb in the nutrition world. And that should clear up, you getting deceived by some other form or name of sugar.
Yeah, if you're wondering where to find added sugars on the nutrition label, it's under sugars, and then below it, say if it's dairy or something, say it says 10, but then below it you'll see added sugar. And if that says like 6, that means it added more sugar to it.
Correct.
So it's 2 different numbers, because there could be sugar naturally in a food product, like it says dairy or fruit or other things in it, or a carbohydrate source. But yeah, the added sugar is below that normally.
That's really common too in like dried fruits. There where some are great as long as the ingredients say, if you're having mangoes, they just have mangoes, right, in the ingredients. But that's another place you would find that is looking at the sugar content. It's going to be high, but that's naturally occurring. And then under it is where you'd want to see if they added extra in. So very common in the dried fruit world as well.
They do that in canned fruit too. You have to look for like unsweetened or even apple sauces or sauces like that.
Yeah.
If you see in the front it says unsweetened, it normally means it didn't add any extra sugar to make it sweeter.
You can see that too in like different protein bars or energy bars that might have like dates to sweeten it. Like I eat RX bars on occasion, and those don't actually, well, some of the flavors have added sugar if they have chocolate in them, but a lot of them, look like they have a lot of, sugar, but when you actually read, some of them have up to no added sugar. It's all coming from dates. So again, just being able to decipher the difference.
Yeah. So, could you discuss the health consequences of excessive sugar consumption, particularly added sugar?
Yeah. So, one of the most obvious, I would say, is increased risk for obesity, or if not full blown obesity, just carrying around extra body fat that's really unhealthy, which is kind of the start and leads to a host of other issues that we see in our modern society today. So it's one of the greatest risks also for cardiovascular disease. There's links between excessive added sugar consumption and high blood pressure. This one probably goes without saying, but diabetes, and then also fatty liver disease. In addition to that, it's also been known to increase inflammation. And in our conversation I think we did a whole podcast on inflammation, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So inflammation is linked to literally every known disease or health condition known to mankind, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, and much more. So quite honestly, I think you could say sugar is linked to just about any health consequence you could name to me. And then a side note here, Alzheimer's is actually, this is probably controversial in some medical communities, but it's actually been renamed by some as type 3 diabetes, because the link between individuals with type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's is so strong. So they're finding it to be like almost a form of diabetes.
Yeah, the brain can't run off of glucose as well anymore, so it gets impaired how it digests it and uses it for mental energy. That's Dr. Perlmutter who researched that a lot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a couple other MDs that have too. That's the only one I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, there's a few, and then a few books that have been done on the benefits of the ketogenic diet, if like for like early stages of dementia or even full-blown Alzheimer's, and how that can help with. I don't want to say it's going to be a cure for it, but how it can help mitigate some of the effects of it is pretty powerful. So it just goes to show how bad sugar is for brain health.
Yeah, the brain runs off ketones. It's a different neurological pathway than carbs and glucose. The brain still needs some glucose, but it can produce its own in the absence of carbs. And then from what I've heard, it can't cure it, but it can stop it from progressing and getting worse. Yeah. So if you catch it early enough and you maintain it, it can keep it from advancing more than you already are. So,
yeah.
So how does high sugar intake relate to conditions like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease?
So this question kind of ties in with the last one, but I kind of just rattled off some things it was connected to, but I'll kind of expand upon some of these processes in the body. So high amounts of sugar in the diet, like excessive amounts, overload our liver, and our liver converts that excess sugar into fat. So here we go. Fat doesn't make you fat. Sugar makes you fat. But anyways, so over time, if we're, we're not talking one day of, eating some donuts and drinking some sugary drinks. I'm talking over time, and this is a regular part of your diet, and you're consuming too much sugar, your body doesn't have processes to deal with that. So it turns into excess body fat. So that's kind of the link with, sugar and obesity. And then this is being obese is a major contributing factor to developing diabetes. You can also get type 2 diabetes, I want to note, without being obese as well. It's not, sometimes we just think like, oh, well, I'm healthy weight. Like I don't carry on excess body fat. Like I'll keep drinking my Mountain Dew. That, it doesn't always show up as weight gain in all individuals because we're all very different in how we're predispositioned. But that doesn't mean that you have no risk for developing diabetes from consuming excess sugar. So I want to be kind of a little bit blunt on that. Also, when we consume too much added sugar, as I mentioned, it can cause elevated blood pressure and also lead to chronic inflammation in our body, which are both pathways to leading to heart disease. It's all interconnected. But I'm trying to think if I can think of anything else. Over time too, when we eat or drink too much sugar, it makes us feel more hungry too. Like we're not satisfied, we're not satiated. And that is another way in which it just causes us to overconsume calories in the diet, again, leading to obesity. It's just this big spiral, all connected together. A lot of times when you develop one thing, it leads to another thing. So
Yeah, there's more studies just came out looking at type 2 diabetics are really predisposed to heart disease now.
Yeah.
Because it's a chronic inflammatory state of the body, which eventually can, affect your heart valves, and that's how it
100%.
happens.
Yeah.
So we're going to start talking about artificial sweeteners now. Get off just the normal sweeteners. So what are artificial sweeteners and how do they differ from natural sugars in terms of composition and sweetness?
So artificial sweeteners are known also as like sugar substitutes. So they have way less sugar, actually many times no sugar or calories at all. And they taste sweet like sugar, actually oftentimes way, way sweeter than sugar. Like I'm talking 1,000 times sweeter than sugar. But again, they don't provide any calories in the diet. Sounds great, right, Mike? Like let's just eat those, right?
Yeah.
Not quite, but so a lot of times we're going to find artificial sweeteners in products that are labeled as sugar-free, or a lot of times like in your diet soda, you're going to find it. So anytime on a food label, if it says sugar-free, you should probably have your red flags on. We'll just put it that way. That doesn't always mean good. There are many different types of artificial sweeteners, and there's different names for them. So first one is, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, asulfame potassium. It's also known as asulfame K. It can be labeled as either one. It's the same thing. Aspartame, which also is like those little packets you get that are labeled as equal. If you
It's
know
in a lot of diet and 0-calorie pops.
Yeah, aspartame's a pretty common one. Neotame is another one. Saccharin is another artificial sweetener. That's actually the little packets that say sweet and low on them. That's saccharin. Sucralose is another one. Splenda is like one of the common names for that. I think that's one that people are pretty familiar with. So those are the artificial ones. And then there's also, in terms of sugar substitutes, there's monk fruit and stevia. I don't really want to lump these in the same category as artificial sweeteners, but they are a sugar substitute. However, monk fruit comes from a melon. It comes from a fruit. Okay. So naturally derived. And then stevia, which comes from a plant. So I wouldn't really call those artificial, but they can be a sugar substitute.
Yeah. And then are you going to talk about sugar alcohols?
Yes. So I know xylitol is one of them.
Erythritol is another one. They typically end in tol.
Yes.
TOL at the end.
Yeah. So those are some other sugar substitutes.
So are there potential health concerns or benefits associated with artificial sweeteners?
So yes. Should we just end it there?
No. Yes and no. It's a double-edged sword question there, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to find good research on the answer to this question, but to me, there are way more concerns out there than benefits with artificial sweeteners. Okay, so we'll just put it that way. I'm not talking, a tiny little amount here and there is going to kill you off or anything, and they may provide their role once in a while, but they're you definitely should pause on these and not just think because they don't have any calories or sugar in them, they're a great substitute. I want to start with kind of some of the positives and some of the benefits. I do think not every single one that I mentioned above has health consequences. So for example, I don't think there's anything wrong with consuming stevia in moderation. Do I believe there needs to be a little more research conducted on stevia? Absolutely. I wish there would be, but anytime something is not man-made in a factory and it comes from nature, I tend to be a little more open-minded towards it. So I think stevia in small amounts to replace regular table sugar is a great idea. Monk fruit sweetener as well, I think is another one that can provide a good role in our diets. I'm not saying it's like, health food or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a nice alternative. But then there have been, studies done that prove that we really should put our pause on the consumption of some of the artificial sweeteners, like I mentioned, such as aspartame and sucralose, and that list of others I gave above. The one reason that's not controversial that we should be leery of these is because they can actually make us crave more sugar. So that's something to just pay attention to in your body. You might think, well, I'm going to choose the Diet Coke over the regular Coke because it doesn't have the sugar in it. It's still on our taste buds. It's going to elicit a response that's going to make us want more sugar because it's sweet, right? Same thing with any of the diet or sugar-free counterparts. It confuses our brain. It can actually make us feel hungry when we're really not too, much like sugar does in us and causes like the insulin spike and makes us want to eat more and all that good stuff. Artificial sweeteners can actually have that same impact and therefore can lead to weight gain and all the other health consequences like other or regular sugar has. Another thing that's being studied on some of these artificial sweeteners too is the impact it can have on our gut microbiome and gut health and how it can alter that because our body doesn't really break these down. So that'd be another thing that, I would at least makes me put a pause on it. And then there have been some studies conducting linking some artificial sweetener use to increase cancer risk. But personally, myself, I stay clear of artificial sweeteners because I just think there's way more risks than benefits to them. And I think we're better off just trying to come up with a strategy to reduce our overall sugar intake and eat a more clean whole foods diet. And therefore you're not even going to want the sweet stuff. I personally think anything with artificial sweeteners tastes incredibly sweet and I don't even have a palate for it. So, but that's, years of working towards cleaning up my diet and focusing on whole foods, that can just naturally make that a little bit easier for you. So anyways, that's my long-winded answer. I don't know if you have anything to lay in on that, but I'm clearly not a fan. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a big issue if someone is healthy and consumes some of them. If they're unhealthy and it makes them hungry or want more stuff, like I can't really have an artificially sweetened beverage if I'm kind of hungry, because then it will make me hungry. But if I'm eating and happen to have one with it, I'm fine. It doesn't cause an issue with me.
right.
But that's just me, and I also know like the aspartame studies with linking with cancer, it's a really high dose you need over a prolonged period of time, which is equivalent to like over a 12-pack a day of Diet Pop of cans.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't like Diet Pop that much. Once in a while, maybe. I also quit drinking years ago, so sometimes if I'm somewhere and people are drinking and they don't have like club soda or stuff, I get Diet Pop sometimes, and it's like
Right.
this is my only option, so you don't feel different. But
But you're also a healthy individual who exercises, prioritizes your health, prioritizes a clean whole foods diet.
yeah,
That's a very different conversation than somebody that's drinking a diet soda every day along with their McDonald's.
yeah, it's
The
not gonna.
impact that those artificial sweeteners has along with the crap garbage food is a little bit different. So yeah, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
and I would say a lot of We talked about sugar alcohols a little bit, which are the xylitol, erythritol. A lot of those can cause a lot of GI distress in people, including me. I've had them in the past. Like a little bit is okay, but a lot, like it messes with my stomach.
I would 100% agree on that. And
Because they're made from they're like a derivative of corn of sorts, but the way it doesn't impact your blood sugar, it's a different process. But so, what are some healthier alternatives to processed foods with added sugars?
So, I kind of said like in the last question, eating a diet with less processed foods and whole foods in general over time will lead to less cravings, and you aren't going to be needing to search for alternatives, if you will. I know I find this with myself. I know I find this with clients I work with. You just like a blueberry is a dessert after a while, after you eat really clean. Like that blueberry is going to taste sweeter than if you're eating or drinking a bunch of sugar sweetened beverages or treats. But in the interim, better alternatives. This is going to be kind of boring for people, but fruit is actually a great substitute for desserts or anytime you're craving something sweet. Like I find after a meal, if I just like you're just not quite satisfied, like it was great, dinner was good, but I need a little something more. If I just go get myself like a little cup of blueberries or fruit of some sort, like kicks off any craving I had or thought I had of, wanting that ice cream. So that can be a really nice thing if you're experiencing a sweet tooth. If you're someone who drinks a lot of sugar sweetened beverages, I know that is one of the top sources of added sugar in our diets. So if you're drinking a lot of soda, juice, or sports drinks, there are a lot of alternatives and better options out there. So, I mean, there are countless brands of like sparkling water now. Okay, I'm talking like LaCroix water, bubbly, any of those are going to be a great option and alternative if you're just looking for like that carbonation and something that's just a little more exciting than water. I'm a big fan of those. Otherwise, if you're an avid soda drinker and wanting to cut that out, Zevia is a brand of soda that is using stevia to sweeten it. So a little better option there. If you are a person that your morning cup of coffee is going through the drive-through and getting a mocha or a latte, I highly encourage you to start making coffee at home where you can control what you're putting into it. Maybe you put some sort of like unsweetened almond milk or coconut milk or a little heavy cream, and then you can add your own honey. It's still going to have far less sugar than going through the drive-through on your way to work. So that's another alternative, and it's less processed. Another thing too, I know there's some big chocolate connoisseurs out there. So dark chocolate, much better option. And the higher the percentage of cacao in it, there's like the relationship that sugar goes down. So as the cacao content goes up, sugar content goes down. So the higher you can tolerate and still enjoy, the better. And actually you'll find if you consume dark chocolate with a higher percentage, you're not going to eat as much because it's bitter. So
it's very bitter. If you like coffee black, you'll like dark chocolate with cacao.
Yes. Yeah. I actually find myself like if I buy like a chocolate bar that has like only 60%, which is fairly low, I can easily eat like half the bar. Is no problem. No problem for me. If I buy one that's like 85%, I eat a square of that. I don't want any more, and I'm done and I'm satisfied. So there's a little hack to, and plus then it's way less sugar. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's kind of common. Processed foods, like if you start your day with cereal, I mean, I could give you a lot of better breakfast options than cereal, but if you're looking for like a comparable substitute, like a bowl of steel cut oats or oatmeal where you add in your own fruit and nuts and honey and all that to make it a little bit sweet, ditch I don't even know cereal anymore, Mike, because I don't eat cereal for breakfast. I'm an egg gal, so I don't.
Tons of brands. The old ones are still there.
Million choices, but they are all loaded with sugar. I just know that cereal is a top contributor of like processed and added sugars in the diet. So I wanted to mention that one.
Yeah, and if you're gonna make steel cut oats and fruit, it doesn't take that much longer than cereal.
No,
You can
no.
just microwave it. You don't have to do it on a stovetop.
Overnight oats, you can make it the day before. Yeah,
Yeah, I think those are good tips. I think a lot of people, if you just if you want something sweet after you eat, save your fruit for dessert because sure you can overeat fruit, but it's pretty dang hard. You get sick of it after a while.
100%. Yeah. Very few people have I met that are having health issues or weight issues because they're eating too much fruit. I'm telling you, it's
Yeah.
other things going on.
Yeah, they eat fruit, but then they eat, a gallon of ice cream too.
Right. Right.
So, can you recommend strategies for reducing sugar intake while still enjoying sweet flavors in the diet? Well, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but I guess
We
more
yeah we
ideas.
yeah we kind of did. I mean, the more processed foods we eat and the more added sugars, it just makes us crave more. So, um, just trying to reduce your intake of like the processed foods honestly is the best thing, or making your own things at home. Even like if you're not ready to make all the changes to eating all whole foods, like I totally get that. But if you're wanting cookies, rather than going and buying a package of Oreo cookies from the store, like look up a recipe online, make it at home yourself. If you're craving your cookies and you have to have them, because you can control then and cut down and reduce the amount of sugar. So you're way better off like making things yourself than buying the processed version, because it's going to, first of all, have more added sugar. It's going to have other ingredients that our body doesn't know what the heck they are. So I guess that would be my big additional, and as opposed to what we've already talked about, but strategy to help for reducing sugar intake.
So, do you have any other tips for deciphering food labels to make informed decisions about sugar content? I know we hit that a little bit earlier too, but
Yeah, but I can kind of expand upon it. So, my first strategy is flip it over, whatever you're going to buy. I always go to the ingredient list first. I think that can be more of a telling sign of whether it's a good choice or not. Because I'm a big fan of like understanding and eating real food. So if you don't know what ingredients are on that list, it's probably something you should just keep on the shelf. Otherwise, when in doubt, we already talked about this and you kind of hit on this, Mike, but under sugar, checking for that added sugar, that's going to be the big thing, like on the nutrition facts that we want to be able to decipher and keep to a modest amount. But I think we already talked about that, so I won't drive that fact home anymore.
if you're looking at a product with a label with sugar alcohols, that's usually where it's labeled as well. If you're
Yeah.
curious, it'll say sugar alcohol and the total amount. But
Yeah.
be wary of GI distress. I forewarn you from experience.
Yep.
So, are there any specific guidelines or recommendations for sugar intake that people should be aware of? Like, how much should we actually consume in a day?
Yeah, so it's kind of recommended that there's different amounts for men and women. I personally think that's just based upon body size. So these are general ballpark figures. Women to consume no more than 25 grams of added sugar in a day. Men to consume no more than 35 grams a day. Again, this is really based upon probably like the general weight of a female versus a male. Males tend to weigh more, but these are ballpark figures. And then kids, it's going to be much less than that because they weigh less. So not rocket science there. But so to put this in perspective, like one can, just like a small 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola, has 40 grams of sugar. So one can of soda is already putting you over the recommended dietary daily allowance of sugar. We're actually consuming as Americans closer to 75 grams each day on average. So I kind of touched on that when we opened this up, but way more. And kids are like 60 to 70 grams easily each day. And they're tiny little humans. So that's even having a worse impact on them. So yes, there are specific guidelines, and we are eating and drinking way too much of it.
Yeah, and most of the time when you cut back on the amount of sugar you have, no matter where you're at before, you typically start to feel better because your blood sugars will start to stabilize more. You won't have as much up and down energy sways. Because often sugar gives you that quick boost of energy, and then depending on your body, 1 hour, 2 hours later, you can start coming down off that, and that's when you start needing a nap and you feel lethargic.
Yes.
which is not a great feeling.
No, no.
So, what do you see emerging trends in sugar consumption and sweeteners, both natural and artificial?
In the nutrition world, like I feel like people are more aware now than even like 10 years ago. I'm not saying that's making it, you know, causing less problems, but there is more awareness around it. So, on a positive note, because I feel like we've been kind of negative, I think that's great. There's a lot of food manufacturers and like companies coming out with better products. So I think there's movement in the right direction because we have knowledge, but knowledge doesn't always equate to action, unfortunately, because we're still seeing these excess amounts. But I do like when I go to the grocery store, seeing like a lot of better options that do exist. But we got a long ways to go, that's for sure. And we're fighting against the food industry, so we need to just be informed because. As we mentioned, sugar is addictive and they want us to eat their food, right? Because they'll buy more of it. So we have to be super leery and aware.
Yeah, and one thing we forgot to mention earlier is a lot of the artificial sweeteners, they may not have any calories, but like sugar, they don't really have much nutritional value either.
Right.
Unlike fruit, and honey actually have some nutritional value. There's nothing in those. I mean, yeah, it tastes good. At least you're not getting calories. And if you're eating other good foods, it's fine. But I mean, there's no nutritional value to any of
No,
these.
so they don't provide a need. Like we have no need at all in our diet for artificial or regular sugar because you're not getting anything out of it.
No, you're getting a dopamine release,
You
which
can
is
get
a feel good hormone, but
go exercise.
you can get dopamine release from exercise too.
Yeah. Not
And
as fun, but yeah.
there's lots of other dopamine release sensors, but we're not talking about dopamine today.
No.
All right. So, last question. As a nutritionist, you, not me, what advice would you give to someone looking to make positive changes in their sugar intake and overall diet?
So, first of all, I want people to understand like sugar is a drug. It's addictive. Okay. So, don't beat yourself up and don't try to take it all out and change everything at one time because it's almost worse than like some drugs because it's so normalized and it is everywhere. Like you can't go to a store without it being right at the checkout. Like it's everywhere. And it's so normalized, but yet it's just as addictive as many street drugs out there. So be a little bit gentle with yourself and realize like change is hard. So I'm a big fan of starting small and not like cutting everything out cold turkey. While you might be able to do that, it's probably not going to be long lasting and long term. So if you're currently drinking 5 cans of soda a day on top of other sweet treats and packaged snacks, maybe you start small and just say like, I'm going to cut out one of these cans of soda a day and replace it with some LaCroix water. Just start with one, get that habit to stick. And then after a couple weeks, take out another one, or maybe it's something else. So starting small rather than cutting everything out all at once is going to be a better long-term strategy instead of just a quick fix. And I think to mention here is knowledge is super important to change. I think keep in continuing to educate yourself beyond just listening to this podcast on sugar. Like read up on it. I think the more we understand just how bad excess sugar is for us, I think it becomes easier to say no to it. I mean, I take myself for an example. My full-time job for the better part of the last 10 to 15 years has been in the health and wellness industry in some way, shape, or form. So I am literally surrounding myself with it. I'm reading up on it all the time. Usually people I talk to, that it's part of conversations. So for me, it's so ingrained at me, and I just know, like, I understand how bad it is for me. Therefore, it's easier to say no to. So I think knowledge can be super powerful when it comes to trying to get rid of the excess sugar before
Yeah.
like it gets out of control and you develop one of these diseases like I talked about in the beginning. Don't wait for that to happen because it's probably inevitable if you're consuming way too much year after year.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of hit on the head. It's most processed foods are man made concoctions. They're not real food. And a
Right.
lot of people don't understand that. You ask them what they eat, and they say a granola bar. I'm like, that's not really food. It's a bunch of stuff thrown together.
Right. And food manufacturers are like, and that makes me even more angry and not wanting to buy products because they're really smart in how they formulate things to make us want more and make them addictive, which is another reason number 550 why I'm such an advocate of just eating whole, real, unprocessed foods. Because I don't like to support those companies that are trying to manipulate my taste buds. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
When I was a kid, my favorite French fries were McDonald's French fries. It's because they had sugar to them. There's
Coming back.
sugar on their French fries. You can look it up. I didn't make that up.
Yeah, it's not just potatoes, oil, and salt. There's a whole list of ingredients.
Yeah, there's more stuff in there. Yeah. All right. Well, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I hope our listeners enjoyed this, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you again after your next child is coming. For those listeners, Jordan is due in a month now, isn't it?
About a month. Yep.
Do you know what you're having?
Having a second boy.
Oh, boy's ruling the house, huh? You're outnumbered.
Yep. I'm done for now. I have a male dog too, so I'm really, really, really outnumbered around here.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks.